Welcome back to the deep dive. When we talk about international law, IL, we often, we treat it like it's this really practical thing, right?
Yeah, like a toolkit.
Exactly. A manual of rules, treaties, court decisions, all just ready to be picked up and applied, like fixing the plumbing.
hmm But that assumption, that's exactly what we're digging into today. This whole idea that law is purely technical, just about finding the right case or sorting out a specific argument, it's incomplete.
So what's the alternative view then?
Well, what if the very concepts we focus on, the problems we decide, or legal problems, even the words we use, what if all that is already shaped
Shaped by what?
by theoretical frameworks that are so deep, so ingrained, we don't even realize we're using them?
Ah, okay. So that's the tension you mentioned, the sort of invisible structure.
Precisely. It's like the water we're all swimming in, but we can't see it.
Right. So today's deep dive is going to be a really close look, an analytical breakdown of an introduction to a set of essays. Essays designed to make us confront those unseen assumptions.
Exactly. And our mission here is really twofold. First, we want to give you a clear map of the author's argument, hitting every key detail.
Okay.
And second, we want to help you, the listener, build up that analytical muscle, to be able to spot these frameworks in your own reading and work.
So it's not just about what the theories are.
No, it's about why knowing about them is crucial. For intellectual honesty, sure, but also just for being competent professionally.
Got it. And to get us started on this idea, this invisible structure, the author uses a really great metaphor, right, from David Foster Wallace.
Yes, it's brilliant. It sets the stage perfectly for seeing this water.
How does it go again?
It's the story of the two young fish. They're just swimming along, doing their thing.
Wow.
And an older fish swims by, nods, and asks them, "Morning, boys. How's the water?" And the two young fish swim on for a bit. And then one turns to the other and asks, completely genuinely, "What the heck is water?"
Huh. Yeah, that captures it perfectly. Simple, but really profound.
Absolutely. And the significance, well, it frames the whole point of the book, helping us international lawyers
Yeah.
see or up the water that we swim in.
All those assumptions, the biases, the history.
Exactly. That's the water, the stuff that's everywhere all around us. But it's the hardest thing to talk about because it's just fundamental. It's the background noise we've tuned out.
Okay, so let's lay out that map then. What's the core question really driving this whole collection?
The central question is, it's a big one. It's
Yeah.
basically, how do all these often unspoken theoretical assumptions, these presuppositions we bring to IL, how do they actually determine what we even define as law?
Okay, so it shapes our very definition.
Yeah, and not just the definition. It shapes what we think is worth studying, what problems we see as important, and fundamentally, it shapes what we actually do as lawyers, judges, academics.
So it's about the connection between thinking and doing.
Exactly. It's about causation, how the way we think about law inevitably shapes how we practice it.
And the author's main point, their thesis, it goes beyond just saying, hey, theory matters. It's stronger than that.
Oh, much stronger. The central thesis is basically that IL never just happens in a vacuum. There's no pure practice.
Right.
It's always built on a set of theoretical assumptions. And the key thing is, these assumptions have to be made explicit. We need to drag them out into the light.
Why? What happens if we don't?
Well, the author argues pretty strongly that if we fail to address them, it leads to what the scholar Ian Scabby called insubordination against critical inquiry.
Insubordination, that sounds serious. How is not questioning things insubordination?
Because, well, intellectual honesty demands we constantly question our foundations, right?
Mm.
So if you, as a scholar or even a practitioner, just refuse to question the basic ideas of your field, maybe the idea of state sovereignty or what counts as a source of law, you're basically choosing comfort over rigor.
Ah, okay. You're letting the status quo just
Yeah.
ride.
Exactly. You're accepting the way things are without asking why they are that way or if they should be that way. You're giving up your intellectual freedom in a sense.
That really does raise the stakes. Okay, now the source also talks about IL functioning as a kind of shared language, doesn't it? A lingua franca.
Yes, that's a really helpful concept. The idea is that IL works like this common professional language.
Uh-huh.
It lets practitioners, judges, diplomats, academics all communicate and connect across borders. You know, a lawyer in Tokyo discussing just cogems with a judge in The Hague,
Mm-hmm.
they have a shared vocabulary.
It bonds them together.
Yes, it creates a professional community. But, and this is the crucial insight, this lingua franca isn't simple or uniform at all.
Right. It's not like everyone's speaking exactly the same language.
Not even close.
No.
If IL was just one universal language, things would be, well, much simpler. But the reality as the author puts it, is that the discipline is more like a tapestry of different dialects,
Dialects, meaning?
meaning different theoretical approaches. So, you might think you're speaking international law,
Mm,
but maybe you're only really fluent in the dialect of, say, legal formalism.
okay.
Meanwhile, someone else, maybe a critical legal scholar, is speaking the dialect of structural critique. And a feminist legal scholar uses the dialect of equity and recognition.
Hmm.
They're all talking about law, but their starting points, their assumptions, they're different.
So to really understand what's going on, to be a truly um, sophisticated professional,
Yep.
you need to know these different dialects.
Exactly. You need to be multilingual, theoretically speaking. If you only know your own dialect, you risk completely missing the point someone else is making just because you don't get the theoretical framework they're coming from.
You're misinterpreting because you don't see their water.
Precisely. Knowing the dialects lets you decode those underlying assumptions. It's not just academic trivia. It's fundamental to really understanding legal arguments.
Okay, that makes sense. And just to give our listener that clear roadmap, the author structures this journey very logically. We started with the problem, the invisible water.
Right.
Then the text moves to the solution, which you mentioned is reflexivity. Then there's this key distinction between doing law and thinking about law,
Yeah, the practice versus the theory.
which then sets up the context for the inevitable struggle, right? The scientific field where these ideas battle it out.
Mm-hmm. For the power dynamics.
And finally, they give us this really high-level philosophical lens, the idea of world-making.
Yeah, it's a journey from looking inward with reflexivity
Yeah.
all the way to how we construct reality itself.
Okay, great. Let's dive into that first step then, reflexivity. So we need to see the water.
Yeah.
And the tool the author proposes for this is reflexivity. What exactly does that involve, this kind of deep self-awareness in the context of law?
Reflexivity is basically turning the analytical lens back on ourselves.
Yeah.
It means consciously looking at our own thinking, evaluating our own, assumptions, our beliefs, our values, all the things that inevitably color our research, our judgments, our everyday work.
So it's about the relationship between the observer, us, and the thing we're observing, the law.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It demands that we become really transparent, at least to ourselves, about the intellectual framework we're operating from. It's about owning our perspective.
And this stance, it really pushes against a very common idea, doesn't it? This myth of neutrality that seems to pop up everywhere, especially in law.
Oh, absolutely. It's a direct challenge. The author points to thinkers like Stanley Fish and Heidegger to make this really strong claim.
Wow.
There's no such thing as a neutral view from nowhere.
Wow. Okay, unpack that. Why is that statement so pivotal, especially for IL?
Well, because international law, maybe more than some other fields, often presents itself as being very technical, very objective, governed by clear, formal sources, treaties, custom.
Right. The idea is the law is out there to be found and applied neutrally.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the moment we actually approach anything, a treaty text, a customary rule, a case about state responsibility, we're not neutral. We can't be. We are situated.
Situated how?
We bring our nationality, our culture, our personal history, our education, and critically, our theoretical expectations about what law is and what it should do.
So even just deciding which source of law to prioritize or which interpretation seems more reasonable, that's already an act shaped by our background.
Precisely. It's an exercise of judgment, and judgment is never free from perspective. So scholarship or legal practice that claims to be neutral or purely objective, often it's just disguising its own underlying bias.
It's a way of making a particular viewpoint seem universal.
Yes, it's an intellectual move to shield its own assumptions from being questioned. By saying this is just the objective law, you shut down debate about the choices that led to that interpretation.
Okay. And this connects directly to a concept from Pierre Bourdieu that the author uses, the scholastic bias. How does that fit in?
Bourdieu's idea of the scholastic bias is basically the tendency, especially for academics, to pull the thing they're studying out of its real-world context.
How so?
They tend to ignore the practical pressures, the social setting, the political stakes. They abstract the law, treating it as if it exists outside the urgency of a practical situation, as the text says.
So it's like analyzing the rules of chess purely based on the logic of the moves, without considering that the players might be under time pressure, or one might be trying to psychologically intimidate the other.
That's a perfect analogy. The scholastic observer kind of stands back from the messiness of reality. And by doing that, they often give too much weight to theoretical neatness or internal consistency, things that matter in the academy.
but maybe not so much to the diplomat facing a deadline or the person actually affected by the law.
Exactly. It can lead to really misunderstanding what's actually at stake in a legal situation because you're focused on the abstract theory, not the concrete impact.
And this focus on internal coherence, on the rules of the game within the discipline, that links up with Thomas Kuhn's ideas about paradigms, right? This structure helps lock in the bias.
Yes, Kuhn's work is crucial here. His point was that scientific observation, we can extend that to legal scholarship, always happens within a specific disciplinary tradition, what he called a paradigm.
A shared set of assumptions and rules.
Right. These paradigms dictate what questions are considered legitimate, what methods are okay to use, and what the sort of non-negotiable core beliefs of the discipline are.
So let's say the dominant paradigm in IL is strict legal positivism, and then a young scholar comes along arguing we need to rethink everything through, say, a post-colonial lens.
Then very often that scholar is seen as rocking the boat too much. They might be accused of epistemological disloyalty, as the text puts it, or disciplinary insubordination.
Because they're questioning the unquestionable.
Exactly. The established discipline often needs its members to accept the fundamental assumptions to maintain coherence, to keep the group together. Questioning those core tenets feels like a threat to the whole enterprise.
So reflexivity, then, is about creating that critical distance, challenging the paradigm from within, even if it feels like you're pushing against the whole institution.
Yes, it's a kind of necessary internal resistance. It's what stops the academic field from just becoming an echo chamber, constantly reinforcing its own assumptions.
Okay, so we've talked about the need for this inward look, this reflexivity. Now let's pivot to how this plays out in the professional world. The author makes a really key distinction between doing law and thinking law. How are those defined?
Yeah, this is a crucial split they highlight. Doing law is basically the practical stuff, the professional skill,
Right.
like resolving specific disputes, applying legal doctrines, finding and citing precedents, interpreting treaty clauses, the technical craft of lawyering.
Got it. The how-to.
Exactly. Whereas thinking law is more about stepping back. It's the analytical reflection on all of that. It's asking the deeper questions. Where does the authority of this law actually come from? What's its historical purpose? Is it fair? Is it just?
So if doing law is the mechanic fixing the engine,
Ah,
then thinking law is the engineer asking if this is even the right kind of engine for where society wants to go.
that's a great way to put it. And the author points out, critically, that traditional legal education, pretty much everywhere, focuses overwhelmingly on the doing law part.
Right. Law school is mostly about learning the rules and how to apply them. Dogmatics, procedure.
Exactly. And thinking law theory, philosophy, critical perspectives often gets pushed to the side. It's seen as, maybe interesting, but ultimately superfluous,
Yeah.
or even disruptive to the real work.
Yeah, I can see how a busy lawyer might feel that way. If you've got a court deadline looming, delving into Foucault probably feels like a luxury you just can't afford.
For sure. And that attitude is often reinforced by the professional culture itself. But the author notes there are signs this is starting to change, albeit slowly. They mention Thomas Schultz's comment about the Journal of International Dispute Settlement.
Oh, yeah. What did Schultz say that shows this shift?
He apparently made a point of saying the journal's mission wasn't just about reporting on how to do dispute settlement, the technical stuff.
Okay.
Its mission was also reflection on how law is done in that context. Looking at the methods, the justifications, the theories behind the practice, it was a conscious move away from purely technical reporting towards more rigorous intellectual inquiry.
That's quite significant, isn't it? It signals that the discipline should treat IL not just as a practical tool for solving problems,
Right.
but as a complex social and political phenomenon that needs constant critical examination itself. It means looking beyond the strict legal rules and bringing in insights from other fields, which, as we said, the purists often resist.
Absolutely. And that resistance brings us right to that common critique you hear about armchair theorizing. The author acknowledges this isn't entirely unfair.
What do you mean by that? The critique, I mean.
Well, they can see that, yeah, some academics do get lost in the clouds. They have this bad habit, as the author puts it, of creating these incredibly abstract theoretical models that seem completely disconnected from the realities of legal practice or international relations.
Okay, so theory that's just irrelevant.
Pretty much. And of course, when that happens, it gives ammunition to the practitioners who want to dismiss all theoretical reflection as just navel-gazing.
Right. So if that danger exists, what's the counter-argument? Why do we still need theory? Why can't we just stick to the practical rules that work?
The defense is powerful. It's that theory is essential because it provides the very framework for understanding practice and, more importantly, for justifying it.
Oh, okay.
As the author says, and this is a key quote, theory and practice are often one of the same thing, or if you prefer, two sides of the same coin.
Hmm.
Because theory isn't just abstract reflection. It opens up possibilities. It helps us see different ways of doing things that pure habit or rule following might miss. It ensures that practice isn't just done mindlessly, but is constantly tested, questioned, and refined.
So without theory, practice just becomes mechanical and potentially outdated or unjust?
Exactly. It becomes conservative, resistant to change, and ultimately, it loses its legitimacy because it can't explain why it does things the way it does. Dismissing theory is often just a way to protect the existing way of doing things from uncomfortable questions.
Okay, so we've established theory isn't just navel-gazing, it's crucial. But these theoretical debates don't happen in a vacuum, right? They happen within a specific social structure, what Bourdieu termed the scientific field. Let's
Yeah.
unpack that.
Right. This is about understanding the environment where these intellectual battles actually take place. The author stresses that new theoretical movements, whether it's critical legal studies or global administrative law or law and economics approaches, these aren't just quiet debates in seminar rooms. They have real, practical consequences. If a new way of thinking, let's say global administrative law, really takes hold and becomes the dominant way people understand certain international processes, then it could genuinely shake up how things are done. It could challenge, maybe even overturn, the established formalist ways of interpreting treaties or understanding institutional powers in actual practice in courts and organizations.
So the theoretical fight is actually a high-stakes battle for control over how the system works, over the very definition of the discipline.
Absolutely. Which brings us to Bourdieu's concept of the scientific field. How does this idea frame academia or the legal profession as a kind of political arena?
Yeah, tell us more about that.
The core idea is that the field of international law isn't just a marketplace of ideas where the best argument wins. It's also a power battle.
A power battle.
Yes, where academics and practitioners fight for authority, for influence, for control over the discourse. And this authority, crucially, isn't just based on how brilliant your argument is.
What else is it based on, then?
It's heavily influenced by political and social capital. Things like, well, your position in the academic hierarchy. Are you a senior professor at a top university?
Right.
Do you control important journals or book series? Do you have influence over funding bodies or curriculum design? These things give your ideas weight, regardless of their intrinsic merit sometimes.
So the struggle for truth, or the best theory, is tangled up with the struggle for status and power. If you control the main journals, the key conferences, the top law schools, you essentially get to decide what counts as legitimate knowledge in the field.
Precisely. Legitimacy isn't just inherent, it's conferred by the community, by the institutions within that field. It's a kind of prestige economy. Getting that social recognition, backed by institutional power, is vital for one theoretical perspective to become dominant over others.
Okay, and this has pretty big implications for anyone new coming into the field or anyone trying to push a less mainstream idea, doesn't it?
Huge implications. If the system, the education system, the publication system, the hiring system, rewards scholars for adopting the existing theoretical habitus,
Habitus meaning?
meaning the sort of ingrained, almost unconscious way of thinking and operating that you absorb through your training.
Okay.
If the system rewards that, then it becomes incredibly difficult for genuinely challenging or novel ideas to get a foothold. It's much easier to succeed if you play by the established rules and think within the accepted framework.
So it's a system that naturally tends to reproduce itself.
Exactly. It's often a subtle but effective cycle. By controlling the curriculum, who gets hired, who gets published, the system ensures the reproduction and perpetuation of official knowledge, as the text says. Those who don't conform find it harder to get ahead.
It's like a gatekeeping mechanism.
Yes, it maintains the monopoly over what counts as the correct way to interpret the discipline's core ideas.
And this structure, this kind of inherent conservatism, ironically makes interdisciplinarity, bringing in ideas from outside law, both really necessary and really risky.
That's the paradox. The urgency is clear. You can't really understand something like international trade law without economics, or human rights law without political philosophy or sociology. IL is deeply embedded in these other domains.
We need those outside perspectives.
We absolutely do. But the risk, as we touched on before, is significant.
What's the risk again?
The moment you start seriously using, say, sociological theory to analyze why certain states comply with treaties and others don't, or economic models to critique trade agreements, you risk being accused of epistemic disloyalty.
Disloyalty to the law.
Yeah, the guardians of the discipline, often the formalists, might argue you're bringing in external factors that dilute the purity and autonomy of law. You're muddying the waters, so to speak.
So the push for disciplinary coherence, which sounds good, keeping law focused on law, can actually function as a way to protect the status quo, to keep the dominant group in control.
That's exactly the argument. It's a defense mechanism to maintain the professional and intellectual monopoly over how international law is defined, studied, and practiced. The struggle for authority shapes the very boundaries of the discipline itself.
Okay, let's step back now to the highest level, the philosophical underpinning of this whole approach. The author presents this collection of essays not as a competition, but more like a map of different viewpoints. We should probably first touch on the author's own methodological stance in doing this.
Yes, absolutely. The author actually practices the reflexivity they preach. They make a point of saying they're not trying to rank these different theories or declare one the winner.
So no best theory according to them.
No. And crucially, they openly acknowledge that their own selection of which theories to include inevitably reflects their personal background, their academic training, their own intellectual personal journey, as they put it.
So they're admitting their own perspective shapes the map they're drawing.
Exactly. It's an explicit rejection of that view from nowhere. They're being transparent about their own situatedness, which prevents the book itself from falling into the trap of pretending to be purely objective.
That makes sense. And this commitment to showing multiple perspectives sets the stage for what seems like the most profound philosophical idea in the text, drawing from Nelson Goodman. This concept of theory as world-making, what does that mean?
This idea, it's really fundamental. Goodman's core insight is that theories don't just describe reality. In a sense, they help create it. The worlds construct a reality of their own making, is the quote used.
Okay, unpack that. How does a theory make a world?
Well, think about it. The goal of a theory isn't just to hold a mirror up to some objective, pre-existing international law out there. It's more about understanding how the assumptions baked into the theory itself actually shape what we see, what we focus on, and how we act within that perceived reality.
So give me an example, if I'm a hardcore legal positivist.
Okay. Your theory tells you that the only real international law is found in formal sources, like treaties explicitly consented to by states.
Right. State consent is key.
Exactly. So your theoretical framework essentially constructs a world where only those formal agreements count as law. Things like, say, the political power dynamics between states, or maybe historical injustices that aren't codified in treaties. Those things might be interesting sociologically, but for you, the positivist, they're not strictly legal facts.
They get filtered out by the theory.
Precisely. Your theory creates a world made up of formal rules and state consent. But someone using, say, a critical legal studies approach, their theory emphasizes power, inequality, and historical structures.
So they see a different world.
They construct a different world, one defined by those very material and structural factors that the positivist filters out. The facts they see, the problems they identify, the solutions they propose, they're all shaped by the different starting assumptions. The theory isn't just describing, it's framing, selecting, prioritizing. It's world-making.
This sounds a bit like Richard Rorty's idea that philosophy isn't a mirror of nature reflecting reality perfectly.
Exactly. Rorty's critique, and also John Berger's work on how images shape perception, really supports this. Theories, like language or images, depend heavily on social conventions, on the community using them, on historical context. They don't get their validity just by matching some external objective truth. We're always interpreting, always constructing.
And this leads us straight to Nietzsche and his idea of perspectivism, right?
Yes, Nietzsche's philosophy is really central to the author's whole approach here. His core idea is that all knowledge comes from a specific perspective.
And no absolute truth.
No view from nowhere. Since we're all situated historically, culturally, intellectually, there isn't just one correct way to understand a complex legal object like the UN Charter or a Security Council resolution. There are multiple possible viewpoints, multiple interpretations, all shaped by context.
Okay, but this raises a huge question, doesn't it? If all knowledge is perspectival, if different theories create different worlds, how on earth do we choose? How does an international lawyer actually operate day to day? Does anything go?
That's the critical question. And the author's conclusion isn't that we should just throw up our hands in relativistic despair.
Okay.
Instead, They argue the goal shouldn't be to find that one single universal concept of law, because that quest itself is probably misguided. The real goal is to achieve a deep appreciation for this pluralism, for the different ways of thinking about law.
So understand the different perspectives, even if we don't agree with them.
Exactly. And importantly, we shouldn't just discard a theoretical perspective because it seems flawed from our viewpoint or because it makes us uncomfortable or even because some might label it dangerous.
So the response to realizing everything is perspectival isn't paralysis.
No. The response should be intellectual humility and tolerance. Tolerance for those who build their worlds, who see the law differently from us. ##66. Takeaways and reflect.
Wow, okay. We've covered a lot of ground, from looking inward with reflexivity all the way out to constructing reality through theory. Let's try to pull together the core insights. What would you say is the single biggest contribution of this work? And what makes it original?
I think its greatest contribution is really practical, in a sense. It's about helping us, the readers, develop that critical sensitivity, making us aware of the hidden assumptions and legal arguments, our own and others.
Sharpening our analytical tools.
Exactly. And its originality.
Yeah.
I'd say it lies in how it treats these diverse theories with genuine analytical equality.
You mentioned earlier it avoids putting them in neat boxes.
Yes. For instance, the author explicitly avoids the common trap of discussing critical legal studies only through a narrow, predefined Marxist lens, which often happens in introductory texts.
Right.
They try to engage with the substance of each theory on its own terms, focusing on what it contributes to this process of self-reflection rather than just labeling it and sticking it in an ideological pigeonhole. That takes real intellectual discipline.
Okay. Now, before we wrap up, we have to tackle that lingering doubt, that final pushback, the usefulness critique, the idea that all this theoretical stuff is just, well,
And that sees this kind of critical intellectual work as just a sophisticated disease of contemporary culture, as the source puts it. The argument that it distracts from or even undermines practical, useful IL scholarship.
how does the author counter that? How do they defend the value of theory against this charge of uselessness?
They counter it by making a strong defense of humanism, actually.
Humanism, how does that connect?
They argue that scholarship focused only on practical utility, on immediate material effects, is ultimately impoverished scholarship. The defense of humanism here is the idea that intellectual activity aimed at understanding ourselves, at questioning the status quo, at freeing our minds from purely material concerns, even the shackles of materialism, they say, has inherent value.
So thinking critically, reflecting, understanding consciousness, that's valuable, even if it doesn't directly win a court case tomorrow.
Exactly. It's about preserving the intellectual soul of the discipline, making sure it doesn't just become a purely technical, mechanical exercise. It's about asking why and should we, not just how to.
Okay, let's highlight those 3 key quotes you mentioned earlier, the ones that really capture the essence of this whole deep dive, just to help lock them in.
Sure. First, on the core problem, the hidden assumptions, the invisible water. That's page 1. The way in which we understand what international law is and what it does or should do is based on a set of theoretical assumptions and presuppositions which are not disclosed most of the time.
That sets the stage perfectly, the fundamental claim.
Second, on why we can't escape perspective reflexivity. Page 3. By regarding an intellectual framework for the complex social practices that we are investigating, each and every one of us is situated.
Underscores that the observer is always part of the picture, no view from nowhere.
Exactly. And finally, collapsing that theory-practice divide. Page 9. Theory and practice are often one and the same thing, or, if you prefer, 2 sides of the same coin.
Which really drives home that thinking isn't separate from doing. It shapes it. Reflection is action, in a way.
It fundamentally integrates them. These quotes really emphasize that theory isn't an optional add-on. It's the very structure, the very heart of how we engage with law.
And knowing about these different theoretical worlds, these different waters, it gives us, well, freedom, maybe.
Yeah,
And definitely humility.
it really does. Which leads us to some final reflection questions for you, the listener. Things to maybe carry with you as you encounter legal texts or arguments next.
Okay, what have you got?
First, thinking about your own engagement, maybe your career or studies. What's the biggest takeaway from this for you personally? Is it the call for reflexivity forcing you to constantly check your own biases? Or is it more the exposure of that scientific field, understanding law as a site of power struggles, competition for authority, maybe even career politics?
That's a tough one. Okay, second.
Second, a potential limitation. By embracing this full-on perspectivism, by avoiding judgment on which theory is better or more true, does the author risk a kind of intellectual relativism? The anything goes problem. Is that a weakness, especially in a field like IL that often demands clear answers and decisive action in crises?
Yeah, it's a really sharp question. Does acknowledging all perspectives paralyze us? Okay, and the last one.
Finally, application. How could this core insight theory is world-making apply to a real-world issue? Think about a current international debate or a specific case, maybe interpreting a controversial treaty clause like something in the Vienna Convention, where judges inevitably have to make political choices dressed up as technical legal interpretation.
Right, like on page 16 they mentioned this.
Exactly. When a judge makes such a ruling, which theoretical world are they choosing to construct with their interpretation? What assumptions are they embedding? What reality are they making?
That really brings it down to earth. The choice of theory isn't abstract, it has real consequences.
It's a political act in itself. And that's maybe the ultimate message here. Understanding these different methodologies, these different ways of making worlds, it should hopefully help us approach law and maybe each other with, as the author says, more humbleness and tolerance for those who do not share our own beliefs.
It's a journey with no final destination.
It's an ongoing path, a path towards intellectual freedom and understanding.
Well, hopefully we've given you some tools to navigate that path. Carry these questions with you. You might find the water looks a lot clearer now you know it's there, and maybe have a better sense of who dug the pool in the first place. Thanks for diving deep with us.
Happy reflecting.